is Mesa. I'm here to give you a very quick review of theme. We're going to look over three things: how to find theme, how to write your thematic statement once you figure out what the theme is, how to write it, and then also some common mistakes to avoid. So I have my lovely assistant Dory here to help me out, and I'm really counting on you, Dory, to be my assistant. You got this? He's swimming away, so maybe not. So here we go. How to find theme. Okay, so how to find the theme isn't something that you're going to think about once the story is over. It's really something that you should be thinking about from the beginning of the story all the way until the end. So the very first thing that you want to do is pay attention to the characters, especially what they say and do, and look for any changes that they make, because sometimes, not sometimes, all the time, people don't just change for absolutely no reason. Usually people change because they made a mistake and they learned their lesson from their mistake, and then that lesson is the theme. So definitely pay attention to what the characters say and do when you're reading the story. The next thing you want to think about, well, what were the consequences or the result? So what happens after their words and actions? Okay, so if you say or do something, there's either going to be a positive result or consequence or a negative result or consequence. So if there's a negative result or consequence, the author's probably showing us what not to do. And if there's a positive one, the author's probably telling us what we should do. Okay, so look for their action and then their consequence. Okay, once you have that, start to think, what lesson does the author want us to learn? Okay, so once again, it could be positive or negative, but usually if the character learns a lesson, that's the lesson that the author wants us to learn too. Okay, so that's how to find the theme while you're reading the story or watching the movie. You can definitely look for this in movies as well. Okay, so once you're pretty sure that you know at least a vague idea of what lesson the author wants us to learn, the next step is how to actually write it down in a sentence. So we call this the thematic statement. And in 8th grade, always, when your teacher asks you what was the theme, they're always asking you for a full thematic statement that has all of these parts in it. Okay, so you should always write it as a thematic statement, even if it's not specifically asked for in the directions in 8th grade. Okay, so the first step is to think of just a one-word thematic concept. So some examples of thematic concepts are love, friendship, hope, courage, things like that. Okay, and if you kind of feel like, oh, I kind of have a feeling of what the lesson was in the story, but I'm not sure, I can't think of a word to describe it, there's a link in this lesson that is a 2-page PDF. And if you look at the first page, it's kind of like tips and examples of good thematic statements like this. But then if you scroll down to the second page, there's a whole list of thematic concepts just like this. You could probably also just go to Google and Google thematic concepts, and you can get a whole list, and that way you can just choose from the list if you're kind of struggling to think of the word by yourself. Okay, so having a word bank sometimes helps, so check that out. Okay, so that's the easy part. It's just one word, no pressure. Okay, then after that, you take your one word and turn it into a complete sentence with an action and a result. So it's kind of like, if you do this, then this will happen. Okay, or you could write it backwards with the result first. This will happen if you do this. Okay, so you could write it either way, either action and result or result and action, but they both have to be there in a complete sentence. Okay, so here's one example. My thematic concept, my one-word thematic concept was courage. And then after that, I turned it into a complete sentence with an action and a result. So as I read this to you, think about what the action is and think about what the result is. So it says, when faced with fear, have courage and you will achieve the impossible. So here I have that the action is to have courage and the result is that you will achieve the impossible. Okay, full sentence, action, and result. The third thing that you need to check is that you wrote your sentence as a universal lesson. So this means that it should apply to everyone in real life, and that means leave the characters' names out of it. Okay, so I would not write that Jonas had courage and learned that he could achieve the impossible, because now I'm not writing it as a lesson that applies to everyone. I'm only writing it about Jonas. We might have learned it from Jonas, and it definitely, absolutely came from the text. But we want to then turn around and apply it to everyone. Take what we learn in the text, turn around and apply it to everyone. So no character names. Write it like you're talking to everyone in the whole world. Okay? So part 3, here are some common mistakes that I see all the time, every year, that you can avoid. Okay, so first one, I already scratched this out, sorry, because this is take 2 of this video. So it said, the theme is working together. Okay, well, you don't need to tell us the theme is. The only reason you wrote the theme is was to make it a complete sentence. So what you really had was a thematic concept, which is working together, which is great. That's a great place to start. But just adding the words the theme is to make it a complete sentence isn't enough because you still don't have an action and a result. You don't need to tell us the theme is. If we ask you what's the theme, we know that your answer is the theme. So you really don't need the words the theme is. It's kind of redundant, okay? So really, if you boil it down, all you really have here is a thematic concept and not a thematic statement. So let's take a look at this one. Jonas learned how working together achieves greatness. Okay, so now we have an action and a result, and it's a complete sentence. So working together is the action, and achieving greatness is the result. If you work together, then what will happen? You will achieve greatness. So that's kind of a good way to do a self-check, is if you say, what should you do? And then if you do that, what will happen? So if you can answer both of those questions, you know you have an action and a result, okay? But what's wrong here is that we used the character's name, so we didn't write it as a universal lesson. So I kind of fixed that here and took out Jonas and wrote we. And by we, I'm talking about everyone, including myself. So it says, by working together, we can accomplish our shared goals. Okay, so now we have an action and a result. We still have working together as the action and accomplishing our shared goals as the result. Okay, and then the last one says, stand up for yourself. Okay, so that's a complete sentence. For sure, stand up for yourself. But I think it's just an action and not a result. So if we're at school and I see that you have this written down on your desk, I'm going to come by and say, stand up for yourself and what will happen. Okay? So just because you have a complete sentence, that doesn't mean that you have an action and a result. So would you guys say that this is the action or the result? Well, we know what to do. What we should do is stand up for ourselves. So we have the action. What we're missing is the result. So I might ask you, if you stand up for yourself, then what will happen? And if you can answer that, then you've got the result. So here's one last thing that I see in school a lot is once you've got the action down and you're kind of struggling to think of the result, somewhere in that process, you've completely forgotten about the text where we learned the lesson in the first place. So you're just trying to think of anything that makes sense, anything that's true, so that you can end this and move on to something else. And you've completely forgotten about the text, okay? So you might say, stand up for yourself and you will be happy. Or stand up for yourself and that is the only way to be your true self. And then I might say to you, okay, is that what happened in the story? Because even though we want it to be a universal lesson, we still want it to come from the story that we read, and we still want to be able to back it up with textual evidence from the story. So you should be able to back up the action and the result with textual evidence from the story. So if you just need to think to yourself, if my teacher asked me to back that up with textual evidence, where in the story did we stand up for ourselves? And where in the story did that make us happy or be our true selves? We should be able to come up with evidence or where from the story we got that from. Otherwise, what you've done is you've written a thematic statement that's great, but it doesn't relate to the text. So don't forget to always go back to the text in case you kind of get lost and just kind of get off track. Okay, so those are Mrs. Mesa's hot tips with absolutely no help from my assistant Dory. I think my assistant Dory might have to be fired, but he's kind of cool anyways, I guess. Not very helpful though, Dory. What's up with that? I think he's hiding. So obviously ask your teachers if you need help or if you want us to check your work, and we would be happy to help you. So thanks for listening.